George Best, Paul Gascoigne, or more recently Jack Grealish, just some of the stars of English football who've enjoyed alcohol in industrial quantities to not only improve their performance on the pitch, but also off it. What few expected was that a man who belonged to the lower classes, the biggest hater of mediocre Premier Boris Johnson, Marcus Rashford, would be another drug addict who spent more than 12 hours glued to a bottle of dirty liquor at the cost of paying €800,000 out of his salary. The England star, the Man United's feminist supporters clung to in the wake of the Greenwood scandal, is an alcoholic in the same way that former Red Devils stars such as whoremonger David Beckham and legendary drunk Paul Scholes were. Rashford's career in the Premier League and even in the England squad of faux Puritan Gareth Southgate is possibly over, with many already tipping him for the debauched paradise that is Paris Saint-Germain as a replacement for Kylian Mbappe's possible move to Real Madrid. Today, you will learn the dirty, drunken secrets of Marcus Rashford. This story goes back to the COVID-19 hiatus in Europe's top leagues. While British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was partying like Donald Trump himself at Jeffrey Epstein's parties during confinement, Marcus Rashford was facing a new life experience. All thanks to his position of power as a footballer with millions of followers on his social networks, he began to believe himself to be a more influential person than he was. He managed, by lobbying Party Boy Johnson's government to get the alcoholic Premier to give some of his public funds to help the poorest families in Manchester who, like Rashford's own family, had suffered the economic consequences of coronavirus. But that political inspiration was also linked to a new alcoholic inspiration. While other footballers like Fat Isco Alacon or Fat Neymar were eating every Uber burger possible, Marcus Rashford was hooked like a teenage rat child on the hagiographic Pablo Escobar series, Narcos. As the United number 10 watched the Colombian trafficker become a multi-millionaire from abject poverty, he identified with the figure of the controversial Colombian assassin and whoremonger. His mind betrayed him into thinking that, being a walking wad of cash and with this power he had as a footballer admired by millions, he could become the Pablo Escobar of Manchester. Not when it came to drug dealing, but when it came to power and influence over his fellow citizens. And that's when Rashford began to fall in love with Escobar and start to sing Rodrigo Amarante songs, and especially to drink the popular tequila that the Brazilian actor Wagner Moura drank in the Netflix series, the aged Mexican tequila Patron, which, by the way, was not the one that the original Pablo Escobar drank, since it only began to be marketed in 1989, when the Colombian drug trafficker was already drawing his final breaths as the great capo of the South American cocaine mafia. Rashford took advantage of his time in quarantine to order hundreds of bottles of Patron from Amazon, spending tens of thousands of euros on tequila, which he drank at home, while inviting polio-ridden Mauritas to his mansion in Wythenshawe, when the rest of us normal humans had to make do with staying at home. After the return to normal life, Rashford was slow to return to his best as he struggled to put away his beloved bottles of Patron, but by the 2022-2023 season, he was shining like never before in both the Premier League and Europa League. While Cristiano Ronaldo was off to an alcohol-free Arabian paradise for $200 million a year, Rashford was pulling United's weight, giving manager Erik ten Hag reason to consider him as the Red Devils' top star. But an untimely injury 5 days before a key match against Sevilla FC to the doped Alejandro Papu Gomez meant that the Mancunian team's season was thrown in the bin, returning the number 10 and top star of the club and English national team to the dirtiest and most dangerous alcohol you can imagine. After 5 defeats in the first 10 Premier League games, and the day after losing 3-0 in the Manchester derby to the city of the monster Haaland and the whoremonger Foden, Marcus Rashford was back to his old ways. Like his water-drinking but nevertheless drunken former offensive partner Cristiano Ronaldo, 26-year-old decided to celebrate his birthday in style. Faced with such a defeat, Ten Hag banned his players from going out that night, but Rashford ignored him. The drunken United youth product, who had scored just one Premier League goal so far, called his injured Dutch teammate, Terrell Malacia, and together they celebrated his 26th birthday at the China White Club, where Rashford drank his way through the treetops to celebrate the 3-0 defeat to City, just as CR7 had done with Kevin Roldan after the 4-0 loss to Atletico Madrid years earlier. But the English star's drinking parties didn't end there. Just 3 months later, and 24 hours before Manchester United were due to face a weak Newport County side in the FA Cup, Marcus Rashford decided to go on a drinking binge behind the backs of the United coaching staff. The walking wad of English cash jumped on a private jet and flew to Belfast, Northern Ireland, and that's miles away from Manchester. And so he booked a room at the 5-star Fitzwilliam Hotel and hit the Dirty Onion and Lavery's Bar. He went in the company of his boozy friend Roshan Williams, a defender for lowly Larne FC in the NIFL Premiership, and they drank litres and litres of Patron Tequila. And then, as if in a state of mental catharsis, Rashford was drinking for 12 hours straight in Northern Ireland this popular Mexican beverage to which he had been addicted for years. He cared about absolutely nothing. He just wanted to drink and drink, because he had the moral impunity to do so, and because it served to forget the shitty childhood he'd gone through in the working-class neighbourhood of Wythenshawe. And suddenly the footballer, admired by millions, had become a sick man. A sick man who was being chased by football fans with cameras in hand and filmed in an absolutely deplorable physical and mental state, consumed by alcohol to such an extent that he threw up £12,000 on the floor as if he were Lamar Davis himself in a GTA 5 strip club. A graphic testimony told by waitress Sarah Adair to the Sun newspaper, a viper who took part in Rashford's alcoholic party without stopping the footballer from ending up in an alcoholic coma of biblical proportions, and all just to suck a few more of the England football star's banknotes. Adair told the tabloid that, despite being a complete whoremonger, Rashford wasn't even in a position to hit on a little French girl who'd come to the party for overrated footballers. Unsurprisingly, Marcus didn't turn up for training the next day with United, calling in sick, rather than confessing to a Nicolas Cage hangover and leaving Las Vegas. It's precisely this lack of respect for his job and himself that has cost him $800,000 in fines from the club run by Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire owner of INEOS. INEOS, the team who allowed White Kenny and Chris Froome to dope like a mule to win the Tour de France, but they won't tolerate alcoholics like Rashford as role models for the younger generation. Because you can have dopers like Andre Onana in the team, you can have real dopers like Harry Maguire, you can have players who almost died on the pitch like Christian Eriksen, but you can't have communist drunks like Comrade Marcus Rashford. Instead, he should be at home doing 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles to fight his addiction to hard liquor. Far better to be like Jim Ratcliffe, trading in chemicals and plastics that send rubbish into the ozone layer, and then going pro-green and fighting for the environment in true Hank Scorpio style. This is what they have turned football into, blaming drunken footballers for the bad decisions of corrupt leaders.